TV presenter turned farmer Jeremy Clarkson has announced his diddly squat farm in Oxfordshire has been hit with an outbreak of TB.
There's a moment you never see coming in farming. It's not the harvest. It's not the weather. It's not even the financial squeeze that gets mentioned in every interview. It's the moment when you stand in a veterinary office, holding a piece of paper, and realize that everything you've built over years is about to grind to a complete halt. Jeremy Clarkson had that moment earlier this year. He posted it on X. No warning, no careful press release, just raw, unfiltered truth. Bad news from Diddly Squat. We've gone down with TB. Everyone here is absolutely devastated. Not devastated about the bureaucracy, not devastated about the restrictions, about the cow, because bovine tuberculosis isn't an abstract disease. It's not a policy problem or a regulatory headache. It's an animal in front of you. And in Clarkson's case, it was one specific animal that made the whole thing unbearable. She was the first cow he ever bought. Years earlier, before he really knew what he was doing, he'd gone to an auction and brought her home pregnant, with twins. She was supposed to be the foundation of his breeding program, the mother of his herd, the living symbol that he was taking this seriously. Instead, she tested positive for TB. Not positive. Actually, let me be precise about this. She tested inconclusive. Twice. That matters because inconclusive doesn't mean sick. It means we're not sure. It means the test detected something, but the machinery of the system requires clarity. So they tested again, still inconclusive. What happens next is what breaks farmers across Britain every year. You don't get a third test, you get a decision. The animal is marked for slaughter. Clarkson watched them take her away. You can see it in his expression when he talks about it later. The casual cruelty of it all. Not cruelty from people trying to be cruel. Cruelty from a system designed to be ruthless because TB is that serious. Because once it's in a herd, it can demolish everything if you're not ruthless about controlling it.
In a social media post on X, the former Top Gear host said everyone at Diddly Squat Farm was absolutely devastated. He later wrote that the infected cow was pregnant with twins.
But here's where the story becomes genuinely dark. The post-mortem examination came back. The cow that tested inconclusive for TB, that was taken away from her twins, that was slaughtered on the decision of a system that can't afford to take chances, didn't have TB. She was clean. She never had it. And the farm was locked down anyway, for 7 months. That's not a regulatory technicality. That's not something you schedule around. That's a full stop. No cattle movement, no new animals, no sales, no purchases. The farm becomes an island. You can't operate as a business. The government can tell you that, and you have no argument because they're right. TB is that serious, except the cow didn't have it. Clarkson described his reaction with his blood boiling. Imagine standing there, looking at a post-mortem report, understanding that an animal died, that you killed an animal for a disease she didn't have, and the farm is still locked down. Your herd is still restricted. Your business is still frozen, because the system has to assume the worst even when the facts say otherwise. And then, while this was happening, something else arrived. Not on the farm. In Clarkson's body. Aggressive prostate cancer. Detected in May. Surgery in July. And by the time season 5 was finishing filming, complications. An ambulance at the farm. Ending the season with an uncertainty that felt genuinely dangerous. So season 5's finale became a masterclass in how to document catastrophe. Jeremy, recovering from cancer surgery. The farm, locked down by TB restrictions. The crew, working through relentless rain. His dog Aria had just given birth to 11 puppies, and one of them was born dead. The emotional weight just kept accumulating. Then the donkey. In the middle of this, the lockdown, the health crisis, the weather, one of the donkeys developed laminitis. That's inflammation of the laminae in the hooves. It's agonizing for the animal. For a donkey, it's usually a death sentence because they can't be treated the way horses sometimes can. They had to put it down. Clarkson wrote about it in his Sun column months later. He described the farm's emotional geography perfectly. In farming, it seems you are allowed one bit of good news, but it must always be accompanied by some kind of disaster. That line, that's the understanding of farming that TV doesn't usually capture. That's the thing people from cities don't understand. When you're working with living creatures, when you're managing land, when you're dependent on factors you can't control, Good news and disaster move together like a couple that can't be separated.
So, what's been hypothetical is now very real here, and nothing can come onto the farm and nothing can leave it. We're sort of paralysed.
The whole farm locked down then?
Well, on the cow front, yeah.
Yeah.
There would be a miserable amount of wheat we're harvesting. We'd still shift that off the farm, but no,
The TB lockdown itself is almost worse than the diagnosis for filming purposes. Nobody can see it. There's no dramatic moment where something visibly breaks. Instead, there's just nothing. No movement, no work, no narrative. The farm becomes a waiting room where time moves differently. And the restrictions that come with TB lockdown are almost medieval in their scope and severity. You can't bring in outside contractors without full decontamination protocols. You can't move animals off the farm under any circumstances. You can't even let a veterinarian walk from one field to another without procedures. Boots must be disinfected. Equipment must be cleaned between areas. The farm becomes legally toxic, not because it's actually dangerous in the way you'd think, but because the system treats it that way out of an abundance of caution. That caution turned out to be unnecessary, but it didn't matter. The restrictions stayed in place. The farm remained locked down. Testing happened. More testing. The herd came back clear, and clear again. By March 2026, officially TB-free. But here's what TB actually costs, beyond the emotional devastation and the filming disruption. According to AP estimates, the average TB breakdown costs £34,000 to a farmer. That's the official number. But that's just the animal compensation and the testing. That doesn't include the lost productivity, doesn't include the animals you can't move or sell, doesn't include the herd you're overstocked with because you can't buy replacements. One dairy farm that lost 61 cows to TB calculated that milk sales losses alone hit £56,364. That's not money the compensation scheme covers. That's real loss. And compensation never reflects the actual value anyway, especially of breeding stock. For Clarkson's farm, the costs extended into production in ways that went beyond money. Season 6 filming was supposed to start in early 2026, but when you're locked down by TB restrictions, you can't film anything that matters. No dramatic scenes of new animals arriving, no footage of selling stock, no movement of any kind. Just bureaucracy and waiting, and the suffocating weight of not being able to work on camera. The rain didn't help either. In February 2026, Clarkson wrote in his Sunday Times column that it hadn't stopped raining since January. The fields were waterlogged. Nothing could be planted. No farming content worth capturing. The physical farm was operating at maybe 30% capacity because the rain made the ground unworkable and the TB restrictions made everything else impossible. So what should have been productive Season 6 filming became Season 6 delays. The crew, cameramen, producers, sound technicians, grips who'd been working 2 to 3 days a week for 5 consecutive years just stopped because you can't film a story when the farm itself is in suspended animation. You can't create drama when nothing is allowed to move. And Clarkson was in recovery. From cancer, from surgery that went wrong, from an experience that makes you fundamentally reconsider whether you're going to keep doing this. In his signed-off at the end of Season 5, he said it plainly, "If all goes well, I'll see you for Season 6. If not, I won't." Because that's what prostate cancer surgery at 65 feels like. That's what TB lockdown feels like. That's what 7 months of waiting feels like. Not, "I'll definitely be back." Just, "I might be." But he was back. By April 2026, his PSA test showed no evidence of cancer. Season 6 filming actually began despite all the obstacles. The farm eventually became TB-free, and the restrictions were lifted. The rain eventually stopped. Clarkson's health stabilized. What's striking is how little fanfare any of this got. You don't hear about it unless you were watching closely. The TB outbreak became a footnote in Season 5 narrative. Clarkson's cancer became the shock ending of an episode. The crew's exhaustion became a comment made in passing. But here's what actually happened. A television show about farming, one that had become Amazon's biggest non-scripted hit, nearly became impossible to make because reality showed up and refused to cooperate. A man who spent a decade at the top of entertainment found himself facing mortality. A farm that he'd invested millions into became legally toxic. An animal that he personally cared for died in a cascade of protocol and bureaucracy. And through it all, the show had to be made. Season 6 filming continued. Clarkson showed up, the crew showed up. Because farming doesn't stop for your health. It doesn't stop for disease control. It doesn't stop for rain or grief or the weight of 7 months of waiting. It just keeps going. And you either show up to document it or you don't. Clarkson showed up. And that's the real story that the TB crisis tells. Not about disease or regulation, though both matter enormously, and both are part of what happened, but about the actual weight of commitment, about what it genuinely costs to keep a farm running when everything that can go wrong is actively going wrong at the same time. About a man standing in a muddy field in early 2026, having just survived cancer surgery and a lockdown farm and the death of his first cow, and 7 months of waiting, deciding to pick up a camera and keep filming anyway. Because the farm is the story, and the story, once you've started telling it, has to be told, even when telling it nearly destroys you in the process.